Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom.
Good morning. This is Jos Visser, the author of Wednesday Wisdom. And this week's episode is called We Need More Agile System Design. As some of you know, my parents owned and operated a bar and restaurant. We had 10 seats at the bar, 60 seats in the restaurant, and about 100 seats on the patio outside. Walking in and out with all of the orders and dirty dishes was a significant hassle for the waiting staff. So eventually we hired a local handyman to build an outside bar. By the way, completely unrelated, but I got stories about that local handyman that you wouldn't believe, including his wife breaking down the door with an axe, illegal radio stations, him running off with the daughter of one of our waitresses, and eventually drinking himself to death in the hospital where he was treated for alcohol-induced liver damage. The same hospital, by the way, where my daughter was born. It's fun to be from a small community. Anyway, one fine day, the handyman rocked up with wood, straw for the thatched roof, and tools, and got to work. Within days, a functional bar stood firmly in place, complete with running water and electricity. A few months later, the town sent us a letter saying that we had erected a permanent structure without a permit. We could either tear it down or belatedly start the permit process. One of the requirements for the permit was that we file the plans with the town. One problem though, there were no plans. Local handyman didn't do plans. He just built stuff. The town engineers were flabbergasted. Surely it was impossible to build something without a design and without plans. So, in what I later learned was a time-honored tradition of all building professions, we created the design post facto. It is of course an axiom of our profession that you should not start building a system without a detailed design doc that has gone through reviews and that is eventually approved by the local high priests of the system design cult. In the olden days, we used to call these high priests architects, but decades of experience with total muppets who shouldn't be allowed to design a binary tree has tainted that term somewhat. I've written about the folly of the approval process before, but now the time has come to comment on the system design cargo cult as a whole. Whenever you're going to build something, it's a good idea to have a good idea about what you're going to build and how you're going to build it. Not seldom you will want to write that idea down and share it with a few people and maybe get some input. So far, so good. Writing your idea down helps you think it through. Sharing your ideas with people helps drive alignment. And while we're using BS business speak, I might as well note that it could also unlock synergies. And getting input helps improve your ideas because, let's face it, you might be an insufferable know-it-all, but you really do not know it all. So far, so good. You have some ideas, you write them down, and share them with some people in order to facilitate a hopefully brief discussion. It is a sad fact, however, that many systems are designed by, let's kindly call them, people with fewer skills and less experience than needed for the task. That is sad because every time you code something, you create lock-ins. Some of these lock-ins are weak, and we don't care about them, but some lock-ins are strong, and changing your mind about them later will require a big effort. Examples of big lock-ins are externally visible APIs and everything that is related to the core data model, as often expressed through these APIs. Lock-ins are not the only problem though. Sometimes a system is designed with faulty premises in mind. I'm reminded of an example very early in my career when a group of developers built a new system for processing payment input, all based around the idea that it was perfectly fine to read from and write to so-called VSAM key sequence datasets, don't ask, from multiple processes at the same time. Nothing could be further from the truth, but by the time they figured that out, so much code had been written that it was going to be very expensive to back out from that false premise. So instead, one of my colleagues wrote a hack that sent all read and write operations to a separate I/O process using, at the time, fancy inter-process communication, and so far as the operating system was concerned, all I/O now came from that one process, preventing data corruption. In modern times, I've repeatedly dealt with people who were blissfully unaware of how key value stores actually work, or who wanted to write their own cross-region distributed cache, which, according to them, would have better characteristics than big table replication, because surely they were smarter than the big table developers, and the network storms that plagued big table and caused its replication to sometimes be less than amazing would not hurt them one bit. Getting input on your design ideas is a useful process for preventing potentially costly mistakes, and I'm a big fan of it. However, in many companies, the design review process has gone too far. It often starts well intentioned. Some senior engineers organize a meeting where people can bring design documents for review and to get input. Pretty soon, though, things get out of hand. The documents that are presented are, of course, imperfect, so templates spring into being in order to ensure that the design doc writers do not forget important factors, such as where the logging will go or what the backup strategy is. It is the nature of these templates that they only grow and refine over time. So, quite quickly, the template is full of sections that do not pertain to the vast majority of systems that are being designed, making conforming to the template a non trivial task. Then, some senior engineers, probably drunk on their own experience, lobby for the design process to become compulsory. This is wholeheartedly embraced by senior managers who are always on the lookout for risk reduction and who don't mind being able to point to an approved design when the inevitable blame allocation phase that sits at the end of every project comes to pass. This part of the story leads to even more finicky design reviews because who wants to be on the hook for a design unless they have gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and all of their points have been addressed? All of this does not do wonders for velocity. At one company I worked for, the situation had become so dire that it became almost impossible to launch something. This gave rise to a hilarious video and a project called Trainwreck that sought to remove as many hurdles as possible, including mandatory reviews of all kinds. To make matters worse, though, the entire design review process doesn't even guarantee better systems. Whenever we are building something, be it code or an entire system, we only have an inkling about what we should build and what sort of day-to-day environment the system will be exposed to. We tend to overestimate some requirements and underestimate others. We are blissfully unaware of some aspects of the system that will prove to be non-trivial to deal with. We have badly hidden desires to use certain technological solutions. And, to top it off, the actual requirements, which we don't understand well to begin with, change while we are building the system. Demands change, user behaviors change, needs change, and fast changing technology kills our carefully designed systems by taking some failure modes off the table and introducing new ones. We want to build for the ages, but everything we build requires constant attention to change to the latest and greatest insights about what we need. So, what we need is for design to be a bit more agile. A lot of bad things have been said about agile methodologies. Most of that not without any basis in fact, but it's not that the core tenets of the Agile Manifesto are necessarily wrong. They're just incredibly hard to implement correctly, especially in complicated organizations that are subject to all sorts of competing pressures that are not necessarily aligned with the goal of effective and efficient system and software development. My own personal brand of Agile aligns with Amazon's philosophy around one-way doors and two-way doors. Whenever you make a decision, it is useful to think about that decision in terms of these doors. Does this fork in the road represent a two-way door, meaning a door that you can easily get back through again? Or is it a one-way door, a door that you cannot go back out again without a loss of hassle, effort, and expense? The strong lock-ins that I talked about before are one-way doors. Take API design. The moment you put your API out there and people start using it, it will become very difficult to change. Sure, you can put out a version 2 of the API, but you need to support the version 1 API as well. And in my experience, it's hard and time consuming to move everyone to V2. On the other hand, which thread pool library to use is a two-way door. Sure, it's a bit of hassle to refactor, but typically the effort involved is limited to a few days of work, code reviews, and making sure that the unit tests pass again. When using a more agile system design approach, you need to have a very good gut instinct for which decisions are one-way doors, which ones are two-way doors, and which ones are just plain dumb. The dumb decisions should be avoided. The two-way doors ones merit a bit of thought, but not too much, and the one-way door decisions are the ones that really need some discussion and input. Take backup as an example. I think there are few people who think it is okay not to have backups, but unless you're doing something very wonky, I don't need a page or two in a design document about your backup strategy. It's usually pretty obvious what needs to be done, and if your initial strategy turned out to be a bit naive, that is typically something that can be mopped up and improved later without too much hassle. Same goes for load balancing. I'll be the first to admit that even in 2025, it is still not entirely obvious how to load balance depending on the vagaries of the traffic involved, but this is something that I trust you to figure out as you go along. With modern cloud primitives, swapping out one load balancing strategy for another is a bit of hassle, but often does not require a redesign of your service. The problem with gut instinct is that it requires a lot of experience to get good ones. The agile system methodology I'm promoting should therefore take the experience of the designer into account. Somewhat junior designer, more oversight and more feedback necessary. Principal engineer, we can probably suffice with a chat at a whiteboard. My goal here is to unleash people who know what they are doing and who have proven to be good at getting stuff done the right way. If you don't entirely know what you need to build, there's little value in spending a lot of time getting a detailed design in place because, well, you don't yet know what you need to build. Traditionalists might retort that one of the points of a thorough upfront system design is to unearth these requirements, but that is waterfall thinking. Often, not always, but often, the reason you don't know exactly what you need to build is that nobody knows what needs to be built, and that the thoughts about what is needed will only start to crystallize once we give the people something to work with. Now, where have you heard that one before? For all of the problems in its implementation, the tenets behind agile software development are still going strong, and nobody is clamoring for a return to the good old days of the waterfall. It is time we start making system design more agile too.